I used to think I knew the difference between admiration and something else, something you shouldn't name. But the day she walked into the shop, wearing her brother's jacket like it still belonged to him, I stopped being sure. I hadn't seen her in years. Not since college, when her twin, Daniel, and I spent half our nights in that same garage fixing things that never stayed fixed. Bikes, speakers, sometimes hearts after a breakup. She used to drop by back then, just to tease us for pretending to be men. I remember she always had this knowing smile, half amusement, half challenge. Now, she stood in front of me again, framed in the doorway like some kind of interruption I didn't know I needed. The years hadn't softened her, not really. They'd refined her. Her hair, darker now, was pinned back carelessly, and she carried herself like someone who had learned to live with weight, but refused to bend under it. "Daniel said you could fix the radio," she said, holding up an old transistor wrapped in a towel. "I didn't realize you were still here." Still here. The words landed heavier than she probably meant. I was still here, same town, same shop, same oil-stained floor. I wiped my hands on a rag. Guess I never learned to leave. She smiled, faintly. Neither did he. The radio was older than both of us. Dust settled in its knobs, one speaker dented. I set it on the counter between us, a relic and a bridge. She leaned closer, tracing the chipped edge with her finger. "It belonged to our dad," she murmured. "Daniel said it still works, but it only plays static." Her voice had this quiet confidence, even when it broke slightly on the word dad. The kind of voice that didn't need to raise itself to be heard. I found myself listening harder than I should have. "I can take a look," I said, softer than I intended. She nodded, folding her arms. The air between us thickened, like an old song on bad reception. I could smell the faint scent of engine oil on my hands, but beneath it, her perfume, subtle and sharp, like bergamot and old paper. It made my pulse skip. "Daniel's out of town?" I asked, mostly to fill the silence. "For a few months," she said. "He told me to find you if anything broke. That still happens a lot." She laughed, but it came out more like a sigh. "Everything breaks. You just get better at pretending it's fine." Something about the way she said it stayed with me. I didn't answer, didn't know how. Instead, I focused on the radio, pretending the cracked dial was more interesting than the way her reflection trembled in the glass. Minutes passed. The small fan on the shelf rattled. She watched me work, not intrusively, just quietly, like she was remembering something she hadn't meant to. When the static finally gave way to a low, humming tune, she smiled. A real one this time. It made her look younger for a second, almost like the woman I remembered. "I can't believe you got it working. Sometimes old things just need a bit of attention," I said. She met my eyes then. Too long, too steady. There was a flicker of something unguarded, something I couldn't name. "Maybe," she whispered, "you're just better at listening." The words hung there, light, but not harmless. When she left, she forgot her scarf on the counter. I should have called after her, but I didn't. It's still there now, folded beside the radio, carrying that faint scent of her. And every time the shop door opens, I look up too quickly. Not because I expect her, but because I can still hear her voice, low, amused, and almost daring, saying that line I can't stop replaying. "Pretend I'm her." She came back the next week, said the radio had stopped working again. It was raining that day, one of those slow, patient rains that blurred everything behind the glass. I was crouched under a half-dismantled car when I heard her voice through the open door. "You're harder to reach than a mechanic should be," she said. I slid out from beneath the car, grease streaking my forearm. She stood there, umbrella dripping onto the floor, her scarf, the one she'd forgotten, wrapped around her neck again. I don't know why that hit me the way it did. Maybe because it meant she'd remembered. "I thought you'd fixed it," she added, setting the radio on the counter. "I did. Maybe it missed you." That earned a small laugh, soft, unsteady, like she wasn't used to letting it out. She waited while I tinkered. The silence wasn't uncomfortable this time, just careful. I could hear the faint tick of the clock, the hum of the rain against the tin roof. Her hands rested on the counter, elegant, but tired. The kind of hands that had worked more than they were meant to. "You don't sleep much, do you?" I said without thinking. She looked up, surprised. "Why would you say that?" Your eyes. They look, I don't know, like you've been carrying something heavy. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's what happens when you get older. Everything you carry just learns to stay quiet. I wanted to say something, that she didn't look old, that she didn't have to sound so resigned, but the words caught somewhere behind my teeth. Instead, I watched the way she leaned against the workbench, her hair falling loose from the clip. There was a gentleness to her, but also a distance, like she was always standing one step out of reach. When the radio crackled back to life, she didn't react right away. The song playing was some old jazz tune, scratchy but warm. She closed her eyes, listening. My mother used to dance to this, she said quietly. She'd pull my father out of his chair no matter how tired he was. Did they dance well? Terribly. She smiled again, small, nostalgic. But they looked happy. Something shifted then, not in the room, but between us. That invisible current that hums when silence starts to mean too much. I could feel it in the air, in the way her voice softened. Thank you, she said, taking the radio back, careful not to brush my hand. I don't know why you keep fixing things that are bound to break again. Maybe I like the challenge. She paused, looking at me, not flirtatious, not even searching, just seeing. And for a second, I forgot how to breathe. Outside, the rain eased to a whisper. She turned to leave, then hesitated by the door. You should charge more for your time, she said. It's worth more than you think. Then she was gone again, leaving only the faint echo of that song and the warmth of her words, quiet, but heavy enough to stay. And even then, I'd start listening for her footsteps long before I'd admit it to myself. It happened late one evening, the kind that feels like the world forgot to turn the lights back on. The storm had cut the power across town, and she called asking if I had candles. The radio stopped again, she said, half laughing, half apologizing. I told her to bring it over. By the time she arrived, the shop was all shadow and orange candlelight. The rain outside fell in long, patient streaks, tapping against the metal roof like restless fingers. She stepped in, shaking water from her coat. I swear this thing hates me, she said, placing the radio down. I think it just likes your attention. Her smile flickered, there and gone. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because you sound like you mean them. There it was, that thin edge between ordinary and something else. I didn't answer, just crouched beside the table, tools in hand, pretending the dim light was enough to see what I was doing. She stayed close this time, leaning on the workbench beside me. I could feel her presence, not touch, just nearness, the soft whisper of fabric as she shifted her weight. She watched the storm through the window. Daniel used to love nights like this, she said. He'd make us unplug everything and just sit in the dark. Said you could hear the world breathe when the power went out. I looked up at her. You miss him? Every day, she said simply. Then quieter. But sometimes I think I miss who we were more than who he was. I wanted to say something, anything, to bridge that ache in her voice. But all that came out was, you still wear his jacket. She looked down at it, brushing at a small tear near the pocket. Old habits. The radio hummed back to life, and for a moment, the two of us just listened. The sound was faint, fragile, a single voice against the storm. She reached out, almost absently, to steady it, and her hand brushed mine. Neither of us moved. There wasn't heat, not the kind people write about. It was something quieter, a pulse, a breath that didn't belong to one of us alone. Then her phone rang. The sound cracked the air. She startled, pulling back as though she'd been caught doing something wrong. I looked away, wiping my hands on the rag, pretending the sudden silence didn't sting. It's my ex, she murmured, turning toward the door. He always calls when it rains. Don't ask me why. I won't. She hesitated, one hand on the doorknob. The candlelight made her look softer, almost uncertain. You shouldn't wait up for people who won't come, she said quietly. It makes the night too long. And then she left, the door swinging open to the sound of rain. I stood there, still half-crouched, her words burning somewhere under my ribs. Outside, the storm grew louder. Inside, the radio whispered the last note of a fading song. And for a moment, I almost reached for the door. Almost. She didn't come for 2 weeks. I told myself I didn't notice. but I started leaving the light on in the shop long after closing, just in case she did. The radio sat on the shelf, perfectly fixed, perfectly useless. When she finally showed up, it was after sunset. No rain this time. Just a heavy, aching stillness that followed her in. "I wasn't sure if you'd still be here," she said. "I don't really go anywhere." She gave a small, tired smile. "That's what I was afraid of." Something in her tone made my chest tighten. She looked different, sharper around the edges, like she'd been thinking too much. She placed a paper bag on the counter. "I brought dinner. Peace offering, maybe." I wiped my hands and nodded, unsure what to do with the sudden gentleness of it all. We ate in near silence. Takeout noodles, 2 cups of coffee gone cold. The kind of meal that's less about hunger and more about avoiding the things you don't want to say. "Finally," she said, "Daniel told me once you were good at listening." I looked up. "I try." "Then tell me." She hesitated, fingers tightening around the edge of the table. "What are we doing?" The question hit harder than I expected. "I'm fixing a radio," I said quietly, but she just stared. "Don't." Her voice was steady, but soft. "Don't hide behind that." The air shifted. Even the hum of the old fluorescent light felt too loud. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe I just like having you here." "That's not an answer. I don't have a better one." She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. "You shouldn't. I'm not someone you should get used to. I already have." Her eyes flickered, surprise, maybe fear. Then silence. Long enough for the sound of the clock to feel cruel. She stood, walking toward the workbench. Her hand brushed the edge of the radio, tracing the old scratches like they meant something. "You ever think about why you stay here?" she asked. "Because it's safe," I said. She turned, her voice barely above a whisper. "Safe is just another word for lonely." That silence again, deep, heavy, full of everything neither of us dared to reach for. "I think about Daniel a lot when I see you," she said suddenly. "Not because you remind me of him. You don't. But because you don't flinch when I do. Everyone else does." I didn't move. Couldn't. "I don't want to hurt you," she added. "And I don't want to be something you fix just to feel useful." I swallowed. The words stuck somewhere between confession and restraint. Maybe that's not what I'm trying to fix. Her breath caught. For a second, she looked like she might say something. Then she shook her head, stepping back. "Don't look at me like that," she said softly. "Like I'm something that could stay." The light above us flickered. She turned toward the door, and before she left, she said the line that hollowed the air between us. "Please don't make me feel seen if you're not ready to look." And then she was gone, leaving behind the quietest kind of devastation, the kind that doesn't break you, just makes the world feel suddenly too still. I found the envelope wedged beneath the old radio, the same one she'd stopped bringing in weeks ago. No name on it. Just a small smudge of oil on the corner, like she'd held it with hesitation. Inside was a photo. Her, younger, maybe late 20s, sitting on the hood of a car that looked a lot like mine. Daniel beside her, grinning. And another man, older, his arm draped casually around her shoulders. Her body language was different in the picture. Open, bright, as if she hadn't yet learned how to guard herself. On the back, in faint ink, "Some things don't survive being repaired." I didn't mean to keep it, but I did. She came by the next evening, not planned, just appeared, like the weather changing. I could tell right away she hadn't slept. Her hair was damp, and her eyes carried that red-tinged exhaustion that comes from too much thinking and not enough rest. "Were you going to tell me you found it?" she asked quietly, spotting the envelope before I could hide it. I wasn't sure if it was meant for me. It wasn't. She said it without accusation, just fact. Still, I felt the sting of something private cracked open. "Who was he?" I asked. She hesitated, then sat down, as if her knees needed the permission. "My husband. Before Daniel died." I froze. "I didn't know you were widowed," she finished for me. "Yeah, 10 years now." The shop felt suddenly smaller, the walls too close. "He was a mechanic too," she said, almost smiling. "We used to joke that engines were easier than people. At least they told you what was wrong." I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The way she spoke, it wasn't grief, not anymore. It was something quieter, the kind of sorrow that becomes part of your posture. "He died on that car," she added after a pause. He shouldn't have been under it. I told him the jack was bad. She rubbed her palms together like she could scrub the memory off. Daniel blamed himself for years. I blamed myself longer. The air went still. Even the faint whir of the ceiling fan seemed to fade. I didn't mean for you to find that photo, she said. But maybe it's better you did. Why? Because now you know what kind of person I am when I say don't get close. She met my eyes then, not to warn me off, but as if daring me to stay. There was no performance in it, no manipulation, just a tired kind of truth. I walked over, set the photo down between us. You keep fixing things that break, I said softly. But you never let anyone fix you. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the picture. And for a heartbeat, our fingers almost touched, not in comfort, not even in longing. Just two people who suddenly understood that some ghosts weren't haunting them anymore. They were just living with them. She drew in a shaky breath. I'm not who you think I am. I nodded. Maybe that's why I can't stop seeing you. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, heavy with everything we both finally knew but couldn't yet say. She came when the sun was low, that strange hour where light looks softer, as if it's trying not to disturb anyone. I didn't hear the door open. Just her voice, quiet but certain. You fixed it again. She was standing by the counter, the old radio humming a low tune that barely filled the air. She didn't move closer, but her presence did what it always did. Rearranged the room, made it smaller, heavier, alive. I wasn't sure if you'd want it back, I said. She smiled faintly. You say that like it isn't yours now. Neither of us laughed. The silence that followed wasn't awkward anymore. It was something else. A kind of stillness that happens when both people finally stop pretending there's anything left to hide. I saw your brother yesterday, I said. He asked if you still visit the shop. She looked down, tracing the rim of her coffee cup. And what did you tell him? That you do, but not enough. That earned the smallest flicker of surprise, maybe even relief. She set the cup down, walked to where I stood by the window. Outside, the light was fading into that gold-gray blur of early evening. I don't know what this is, she said, her voice barely carrying. Whatever's been happening between us, it shouldn't feel this easy and this hard at the same time. I nodded. I know. She looked at me, really looked. You remind me of him sometimes. Daniel, the way you wait before you speak. The way you fix things without asking why they're broken. I'm not him. I know. She said it softly, like she'd already forgiven herself for comparing us. That's what scares me. Her hand brushed the workbench, fingertips catching the faint hum of the radio's vibration. Do you ever think, she said, that maybe we're just standing too close to the same wound? I think maybe that's why it doesn't hurt as much. She exhaled, something breaking quietly in her. Not a sob, just release. Then she stepped closer. Not dramatic, not trembling, just real, human. For a moment, her shoulder brushed mine. She didn't pull away. We didn't touch after that. Not really. Just stood there, close enough for the warmth of her sleeve to find my arm. The song on the radio shifted to static, then caught again. A soft, wordless melody that filled the pauses we couldn't. I don't want to start something I can't finish, she whispered. You already have. Her eyes flicked to mine, searching, uncertain, maybe a little tired. And then she did something I'll never forget. She leaned her forehead against my shoulder, just once, barely there. No kiss, no confession, just that, the weight of someone who'd stopped running. When she finally pulled away, she didn't look at me. She just said, keep the radio. It sounds better here. The door closed behind her with a quiet click, and for a long while, I stood in that same spot. The scent of her hair still clinging to the air, the warmth of her presence refusing to fade. And in the low, fading hum of the old radio, I could swear I still heard her, not her words, but the silence she left me with. The kind that says everything. It's been almost a year since the night she left the radio with me. I still keep it on the shelf, next to the window where the light hits it in the late afternoon. It still works, most days, though the sound comes and goes like a memory trying to decide if it wants to stay. People think stories like this end in something clear, a confession, a kiss, a clean break. But that's not how life works. It's slower, messier. It fades unevenly, like the hum of that radio when the signal drifts in and out. Sometimes, when I close the shop late, I catch myself listening for her voice outside. Not because I think she'll come back, but because the silence feels fuller knowing she once did. She still visits, every now and then. Not often. Usually just to drop something off for Daniel, or to pick up a repair that doesn't really need fixing. We don't talk about what happened. We don't even stand too close anymore. But every time she leaves, there's this quiet exchange, a look, a small smile, a sense that neither of us regrets what we almost were. And that's enough. She told me once that I reminded her of what she'd lost. I think, in some way, she reminded me of what I hadn't yet learned. That love isn't always about having someone. Sometimes it's just about seeing them, even for a moment, and being changed by it. I don't wait for her anymore. But I don't move on from her, either. She's not a wound. She's a room in my memory I can walk into without it hurting. Just a soft ache that feels like living. The other day, Daniel came by. He saw the radio, smiled, and said, "You kept that old thing?" I told him it still plays, though sometimes the music stutters. He shrugged, said it probably just needs new wires. But when he left, I didn't fix it. I let it hum and fade on its own. Because that's what we were, I think. A sound that didn't need to last to be real. I used to think love had to end with certainty. Now I know it just needs honesty. And sometimes the most honest thing you can do is to let something, or someone, rest in the place where they felt most understood. Every time the radio finds a clear signal, the melody that plays isn't familiar, but it always feels like her. Not a song I can name, just a feeling I can't unhear. Maybe that's what love becomes when you stop trying to fix it. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?